time for Life and Money Matters with the Success Guys, Mike Hill and Renee Guerra. Changing lives one day and $1 at a time.
Good afternoon, KBEC listeners. I'm Jim Phillips, and in studio with me today is the illustrious Renee Guerra. Renee, welcome.
Hey, Jim. Good afternoon.
Unfortunately, Mike Hill will not be able to join us today. Mike Hill is one of the Success Guys, and he's showing his success by going out and helping his daughters win a couple of soccer games today over in Midlothian. We're going to miss Mike. He'll be back with us next week, but, you got family obligations sometimes, and you got to make those a priority.
I think that's a good deal. Mike's been talking about having to spend a lot of time with his kids on Saturdays, so, that's a good thing.
Exactly. He's stepping up and doing the right thing.
Oh, they won a championship, didn't they, a while back or something like that?
He's trying to show off his trophies and all of his T-shirts and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, they're pretty competitive over there in Midlothian when you get into that junior soccer league or whatever it is. So.
Good luck to you guys out there, Mike.
Yeah, hopefully they'll knock them dead today and win big. Success Guys, one of the things we have talked about previously on this show and a couple of times have hit on that whole topic of fear. And that's one of the things we want to talk to today at length about is fear, and then also how fear can also lead into procrastination and how those two things basically stop us from moving forward in a lot of different areas. To that end, Renee, why don't you bring us up to speed with fear? Just where it comes from, how it kind of evolves, and what permeates it into our minds?
Well, fear is just one of those things that it's always there. It really shows itself in many different forms. Our bodies react to different things as we're driving down the road, and we see a dog in the middle of the street, and we have this fear we're going to hit it, and all of a sudden you have this gut feeling inside of you. But fear, when you start looking at it, it can really just demotivate us and keep us from doing things that we want to do in life. And the reason why I want to talk about that on today's show is because, fear is one of those things that can stop us. And so when you look at fear, the acronym is fantasized experiences appearing real. So again, that's fantasized experiences feeling real. So to me, and when you think about that definition, it's the things that are going on in our heads. So I'm sitting here, making my hands go around my head right now as we're in the studio, but we make up all these stories about these bad things that are going to happen to us if I take this risk. So if I'm going to take a step and try to find another job, which there may be a lot of other people out there that are looking for careers or a career change, they have this fear that they're going to lose their house, they're going to not be able to keep their cars, and just, have all these things made up in their head before they even try to even make the change.
So what happens is before you ever make that first step, the mind kind of goes and jumps you far ahead, well beyond what the actual fear was. The fear was getting the new job, but then all of the repercussions or the other thought processes are, can I feed my family? Can I get a house payment?
Sure. And one of those things is that you start making a list of, instead of all the positive things that can happen to you when you're getting a new job, you start making a list of all the fears. It goes into your head. Well, I can't get my resume, or I can't put the right words in my resume. They're going to think I'm stupid because when they read it, it's not going to read the way I want it to be, and it can just really make it tough on you.
Sure.
So, and what I want the listeners to understand is that when you come across fear and you start realizing that you have all these things going in your head, it's just like back in the millions of years ago when there's saber-toothed tigers. There was a fear when you had saber-toothed tigers chasing you because you wanted to defend yourself and stay alive. That's a natural fear that we have like that. So
human instinct.
So when I'm out on a bike ride and I have all these dogs chasing me, there's a fear. One is that they're going to bite me and I can get hurt, or I'm going to crash my bike and then break my bone. So there is a fear there that I have. But when I look at fear as far as what I wanted to create in my life, and what I want the listeners to understand is that when you want to have this fear about creating things in your life, sometimes fear is good.
Sure.
It can motivate you and it can keep you a step ahead. So once you overcome that fear, you're like, I'm okay. Nothing happened to me. I'm still alive. I'm still breathing, and I'm good.
Yeah, the natural fear that exists in everyday life for your life. If you're put into a situation where you think, okay, this is an unsafe environment, that's not the fear that we're really talking about today. That fear is ingrained, and it's there for a reason. It's there to protect us and make sure that we do necessary things. The fear of not putting our finger in a socket,
right,
to get electrocuted, those kind of things. The fear of being around guns or electricity, or being put into situations where you just know that it's not the right environment or the right things are not going on around you. That's not the kind of fear we're talking about here. We're talking about the innate fear that comes from making a decision and trying to move forward in your life. And I think you had a great story that we were talking about before we came on the air, and we wanted to share this with our listeners about the two wolves and that story. So why don't we share that with the listeners?
I really love this. It's one evening, an old Cherokee told his grandson about a battle that goes on inside people, and what he said, "My son, the battle is between two wolves inside us. One is evil. It is anger, envy, jealousy, sorrow, regret, greed, and arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, false pride, and superiority, and ego."
So really all the negative...
On the negative end
of the emotions that go through our lives.
And we have two wolves inside of us, correct. And the other was good. So the other wolf is good, which has joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. And so after he told his grandson that, the grandson thought about it for a minute, and he said, "So grandfather, which wolf wins?" And the old Cherokee simply replied, "The one that you feed." And that's just it's a huge example of what we feed inside of ourselves. So you can either feed the good or you can feed the bad. And so when you look at fear and you start feeding that fear with all these things that go on, I'm going to use that example for fear. It really just it can, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, it can stifle you. It can just stop you from making any type of movement.
I think the headline to our listeners on that is, which emotion are you going to feed?
Exactly.
Are you going to feed the positive emotion, or are you going to feed the negative emotion? If you feed the negative emotion, you're really asking for some major downfalls in your life. If you're feeling down, if you're looking at where everything's going wrong in your life, there's always the old saying, where's the silver lining? Where is the positive in any of these situations? And if you focus on that, 9 times out of 10, you're going to find a way to overcome fear, anxiety. We're going to get into this a little bit later on procrastination, those type of emotions. There are definitely ways to overcome those. But the first step you have to take is recognize what you're being faced with, and then trying to come up with the action.
Exactly. And successful people, when they look at things or when they start having the fear, they embrace it. So successful people will embrace the fear, and, put my arms around myself here, but they know and they understand that it's something that's outside their comfort zone. So they embrace it, they acknowledge it. Awareness is key, as we've mentioned on the show several times, about being aware of your thoughts and what you think and how they can create things in your life.
I think last week or a couple of weeks ago, we had a listener who called in and gave us a great example about how he controls his environment even to overcome his fear. And he surrounds himself with positive images, whether it be a screen on your computer that you go in and you put a picture of your family, or whether it's that motivational speech that you put on the wall of your cubicle, or whether it's the picture of a desert or a sunset or whatever that you maybe put in your day timer.
Sure.
That thing that throughout the day kind of reminds you of where you're headed, what you're doing, and why you're doing all of this wonderful stuff that we do in our day-to-day life.
Sure. And, go back to the successful people, is that they also experience it. And the other thing that they do, and I really love this, is that successful people will take fear along for a ride with them.
Oh, that's a great...
So I really love the analogy of that, is that, they take it along for a ride. And so they just say, hey, it's there. It's part of what I'm trying to accomplish in my life. I'm trying to create this dream. And they are putting their heart and soul into what they're trying to create. And they know it's there. It's like you have a little knapsack of fear on the side of your belt, as you're walking around and creating your dream.
Well, I got to tell you, I envisioned Renee Guerra on the tandem bicycle. Renee on the front, and then the back is just this huge sign that says fear. And you're taking it up the hill as you're doing your bike riding and going forward. So, hey, speaking of bike riding and tandem riding, we got a young lady, Carol Bug, who you ride bikes with a lot. You had a story about her and how you and she kind of went into a situation where fear kind of overwhelmed you at the beginning, but you were able to overcome that.
Well, I bought a tandem last year, tandem bike ride, and a tandem bike, and that's where 2 people were on it, of course. And so we were out training last summer, and Carol had mentioned that she said, well, I don't want to go up this Texas Plume, and I'd mentioned it earlier in the ride. So let's go to Texas Plume, and what it is, it's over by Joe Pool. It's a road that has it's about a mile and a third long, has 2 good climbs. One is a 10%, and the other's around a 12%. So that's pretty steep. So as we were riding down 67, I said, let's go to Texas Plume and try it out. She says, no, I don't want to go because I'm afraid that we start going up the hill that we might fall over. So the fear is that we just would not have enough momentum to get up the hills. And I knew that we could do that. And so I said, no, let's go. And I was almost about to let her talk me out of it and say, well, we'll just do it another day. But I said, no, let's go. And I kept on. I missed the turn. She's like, where are you headed? Or I think it's something along like that. So we started going down 67 and came down Lake Ridge Parkway. And, there's several gears on the tandem that, you can put it into a really easy granny gear, like I call it. And so we started going up the climb, and there was no issue at all. And there was the fear of falling over never came into my mind, never even came into that.
Were you able to see her reaction on the bike, though? Were you able to see what she was going through?
No, I didn't. I couldn't see behind me, but once we made the second climb, which is the steepest, and so once we made that, it really peaks up pretty tough. And so we got up to the top, and I said, hey, that wasn't so bad, was it? And so if I had listened, or if I had gotten into the fear myself, then we probably would have never have tackled that climb.
Sure.
And that's what I'm trying to want the listeners to understand, is that sometimes you're going to have to push through that physical element. Or if someone else is telling you about their fear, then you can acknowledge that. And just like I said earlier, I took that fear with me for a ride. I took it along with me. And I said, okay, in my mind, I know I can do this. I know I can handle it. And so, it opened up a different door for her, I think, when she was able to realize that we made it. And later on, we were talking to some friends of ours, and we said, we went up Texas Plume on a tandem. They're like, yeah, you guys are crazy. And I'm like, oh, it wasn't really that hard. So, again, it's what people make this story about how big it is. And, I went on a bike ride in October. It's called the Lakey Death Ride. And there's probably about 8,000 feet of climbing in 2 days.
Wow.
That's twice as hard as what Carol and I did on that day last year on Texas Plume. And there was 8 tandem teams out there riding all these hills that were just making it, they're just going very slow, but they made it.
Sure.
So the fear was they weren't going to fall over. They made it. So, I want the listeners to understand that, too, is that you can push through it.
Well, we talked earlier about time and speed. I think those are very critical elements to overcoming fear. A lot of times people think that their body just literally shuts down and says, I'm not going to move forward.
Exactly.
I'm not going one step further on a trail or with a decision or whatever it is, because I'm at that point where my body is physically shutting down. And to that end, that's when you really have to just take the deep breath and begin to reevaluate the situation and begin to look at what the positive really is in that situation. If you were going to fall over on that bike, would it hurt you? Yes.
Sure.
Is it a death-defying situation? Probably not. You're going to get some bruises, and it may not be the best thing for you. And you're also going to have those situations in your lives, and we've seen this on airplanes and other situations where people really do feel like they are put into the death-defying situation. And in each one of those cases, it's, again, a matter of understanding and putting the positive thought process into the brain rather than letting the brain spiral out in a negative context and just not allowing you to ever go forward.
Yeah, exactly.
That happens a lot. We've talked about that. Susan Jeffers, interesting author. You and I were talking about her earlier today and what she's kind of contributed to Jack Canfield. And Jack Canfield's gentleman that you and I both have a lot of respect for, and a wonderful author. She's done a whole series of thought processes and so it relates to fears. Why don't you share with our listeners that?
Well, I'd recommend this book if anyone out there has this, what they have fears, is that she wrote a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And
can you repeat that? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Feel the fear.
Feel the fear and do it anyway. So if anyone is interested, I would look at her book. Her name is Susan Jeffers, and that'll give you some ideas on how to overcome some of your fears. And basically, I haven't read the book, but just from listening to Jack and talk about how he's overcome fears, he uses some of her analogies as far as being able to overcome some of the fears. And basically, what we mentioned about acknowledging it and understanding it, and then having an awareness of what you're thinking, what your thought process is. But, that in itself, when you say feel the fear and do it anyway, to me, it reads, oh, what the heck, just get it done, go for it. And that's another way of looking at it. So, for me, it's one of those things that will always be there. Fear is something that we'll always have as a protective and, trying to keep us safe.
Sure.
But you have to overcome it. I mean, it's one of those things is to be successful in life and to create the things that you want, you've got to really look at it.
Fantastic. Hey, listeners, if you're out there and you've got a story about fear and how it's kind of delved into your life and how you overcame it, we'd always love to hear from you. Give us a call at 972-923-1390 or 972-938-1390 on the Metro line. And with that, we'll be back in a minute. We'll take a short commercial break and hopefully be able to answer some of your questions going forward in terms of how you overcome fear or where fear is in your life today. I did not plan to play Tears for Fears on purpose there. That just kind of happened when the bumpers music came up. How appropriate was that? Tears for Fears. Little Saturday afternoon bumper here on the Success Guys. Renee Guerra and I'm Jim Phillips, and we're happy to be sharing with you some stories today about how people have overcome their fears and how they've kind of moved on in their lives and created positive responses. Another area that we are going to get into in the second half of our show is procrastination. We want to also talk to 18 different ways to stop procrastination and going forward. But before we get to that one, I want you to tell me the story about your wife, because I think this is very impactful as it relates to a physical fear in your hiking experience with her up in Colorado.
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, we were on a trip in Colorado, and we had read about this hiking trail that had this beautiful meadow with all the trees, aspen trees that were blue, that had their white color and the deep green background lush of the foliage. And we read about it, and so we thought, well, let's go take this trip. Let's go drive over there. It's about an hour drive. And so we went out to this area, and the interesting part about as we were driving in is there's these great big boulders that were in the park entrance. And actually the entrance had a lot of water that had kind of eroded the road, so this big boulder was kind of sitting precariously on the right-hand side. It looked like it could fall over on our rental car, so that kind of freaked my wife out at the beginning. But we got to the trailhead and got to the trail and started hiking up, and it started pitching up pretty quick, and we were in the trail about 45 minutes into the hiking. We reached this area that had, the trail's about 4 foot wide in this one space, and it had about 25 feet. But when you looked over to your left, it was about a 40 or 50 foot drop to the left-hand side. And it rained a little bit before we got there, so as we were hiking up this trail, we had our hiking poles, and anyway, we got to this area where they had that drop off, and my wife was like, I can't make it. I've got to stop. I'm like, well, what's going on? She goes, I'm scared I'm going to fall over. And she always feels like she's clumsy, and she's not that clumsy. And I said, well, hey, hang out here and wait for me, and I'll walk around the edge here and see where the meadow is. We definitely want to be able to see the meadow. And she said, okay, go on by yourself. So I did. And so while I was up there hiking a little bit to find out where the meadow was, she was back hanging over by the trail. And, you know, all this fear was going in her head. This was what she shared with me. All this fear was going in her head. So she had her hiking poles. Her hands were very sweaty, gripping the poles. She was just kind of...
Her body was beginning to go to shut down.
Yeah, she was shaking. Her legs were aching because she just couldn't take another step. She kept looking over to the left thinking that she was going to fall over off the side there. And the interesting part about it was, Jim, is that in her mind, instead of a 4-foot trail, it was like a balance beam, like a gymnastics balance beam, looked like 4 inches wide.
She and Nadia Comaneci were trying to get a 4-inch beam in the middle of the Olympics, and everybody in America and the world was staring at her. Sure.
Yeah. So the 4-foot trail narrowed down to a 4-inch balance beam, and so in her mind, it was like, I'm going to fall over, and there's still plenty of space. So, she started thinking about all these things that were scaring her, and then she became aware of it. She goes, why am I having all these thoughts that are going in my head? I'm not going to fall off. And meanwhile, I'm still up hiking, looking for the meadow. And so I was probably gone about 5 minutes at the most, and I came back.
In her life, it's probably felt like 5 hours. Sure, 5 or 6 hours, because her mind and body now at this point have shut down.
Yes, she was just like, hey, I'm not sure I can even move. I'd have to sit down just to overcome the fear. It's like people walking up to the edge of a railing, and you see people sit down sometimes, or at least I do when I was a kid. But anyway, I came back, and she was stuck. I mean, it was kind of interesting to see her just kind of with her poles and not even moving. And I said, you all right? And she's like, no. And she goes, it felt like you've been gone forever. I said, well, I haven't been gone that long. And I said, well, it's just around the corner. She goes, well, how far is that? And I said, just a little bit further, but you have to cut across this edge here. I said, but one thing I don't want you to do is don't look to the left. Don't look down. And she said, well, I don't know if I can do that. And I said, well, yeah, you can. I said, what you do is look at the back of my heels, back of my shoes. And I said, I want to take real small steps. And I said, we'll just move our poles at the same time. I said, but don't look to the left, look at my heels. Look at my heels as we hiked this path. And so we did. We made it to the edge. We got around the corner and made it up to the meadow. And she just had this great big grin on her face about being able to overcome that. And that's when she started sharing all the, like you said, about shutting down and the sweaty palms and not being able to overcome that. But the fear was that she was not going to make the hike. But the other fear, Jim, was that she was not going to see that beautiful meadow. And man, it was just extremely gorgeous, because we usually pack some food with us as we go hiking, and we'll sit around and enjoy that. But that was the other thing, is that if she had not worked through that fear, she would have never made that to the meadow where we hung out for about an hour and a half, just kept on hiking up, and we didn't have to deal with anything like that.
Well, what I took from it, too, was the fact that what you were able to do was get her to refocus from the fear, which was this huge ledge and her falling off into the chasm, and saying, instead of focusing on the negative, let's focus on the positive. And the positive is literally moving our body one step forward at a time. So let's focus on that. Take your eyesight and literally look at the back of my heel, one step at a time to move forward.
Sure.
And as she was doing that, then all of a sudden she becomes more and more self-conscious and more self-assured that she's not going to fall off, and she's focusing on the positive of, i.e., continuing to move, rather than the negative, which was to the right of her as she looked down into that chasm.
Yeah, I was proud of her. I mean, it's because the other takeaway, Jim, is that when you come across someone that has a fear like that, and you don't want to discredit that fear. So in other words, you don't be, oh, come on, you can do it.
Yeah.
And so it goes back to the tandem, or in Trish instance is you be supportive. So, hey, you can do this, we can do this, or I know you have the capabilities of doing that. So
how many times did we hear when we were younger, oh, stop being a baby?
Yeah,
it's not that kind of stuff. It's what we're talking about is trying to do a positive reinforcement of, okay, here's how you can overcome this at this moment in time. So
yeah, you're supporting that individual too, and you're giving some words of support and saying, hey, and it's what I did with Trish is told her, hey, I know you can do this, I know you can make it, nothing's going to happen, I'm right here. And if I need to, I'll walk even to the left side of you if I have to and hold you. But she didn't want to do that. She wanted to be able to hike on her own. And so you have to give that individual the space. So when we talk about fear as a whole today, you may have someone that supports you. You start reaching out to someone about changing that job that we mentioned at the beginning of the show, if someone wants to change a job and career, then you may reach out to someone and say, hey, that's done that before. You reach out to that individual and say, what happened when you changed your job? And take some notes down and find out what their fears were when they changed jobs, how it worked out for them, what they do, what kind of support system they have in place. Because I think it's important to have a team of people that support you. And we've talked about that too, about having someone, a spouse or someone or a friend.
A mentor. Different support groups, sure.
That can take you through that, because success leaves trails. And so if you can hook up with people that have been in your shoes, then that's what's going to help you overcome some of the fears of either, i.e. starting a business, changing careers, anything and that you can overcome.
We talked about one thing you can do, obviously, is have that support group and support. We also identified some steps at one time in terms of what you have to do to overcome fear. And you and I specifically talked about realizing the dynamics of that fear and also understanding that there's risk involved in any of the decisions that you make, but it's taking those risks and literally being able to turn them back into small bite-sized scenarios or situations. It's like you just alluded to with your wife, Trish. You're not going to get her to go immediately off the mountain and into the valley and see all these beautiful trees. What you needed to do was literally take it and break it down,
sure,
step by step, inch by inch, foot by foot. So the first thing you have to do is you have to address where the notion of the fear comes from. And then once you identify the notion of the fear, then what steps do you have to take to overcome that?
I want to use the example of like we were talking about horseback riding. Let's say someone has a fear of wanting to get into horseback riding, but they're afraid they're going to fall off to get on the horse and they're going to, get stuck in one of the stirrups. Well, one of the things that an individual can do is what we mentioned about chunking it down or scale down the risks. Let's say you go to a trainer and spend the day with a trainer and just watch what they do when they're training the horses, or you go online. There's so much information on the internet now. You can Google horse training, get a video, start reading books about those types of things. What are the things that you can do when you're acting, when you're around horses?
Every one of those steps is reinforcing the positive of the sport or the activity that you're taking on versus looking at the negative. Understand there is a risk, but then how do you overcome that risk and be able to put thought processes into your brain to overcome those?
Right. You're doing the groundwork. You're doing some investigation, so to speak, or just finding out some information on how to become a horse rider or take the lessons, the risk. Just like my wife, she actually been taking some horseback riding lessons the last year. And one of the things that she was afraid of, the horse that she has, or we have, it was a pasture horse for 9 years and hadn't been ridden in 9 years. So she was afraid to get on that horse, and so we had the horse trained, and then Trish was doing a lot of groundwork, doing a lot of reading. She bought some videos and started finding out a little bit more because her fear was not being able to control the horse.
The differences, though, are physiological fear versus mental fear. Both of those exist in any activity or endeavor that we take. The physiological fear of riding a horse is that you're going to fall off.
Right.
The mental fear is you're dealing with an animal that you don't control. Mm-hmm. It's just you against another body on the planet. So how do you deal with those? Is there different techniques, different measures that you go through?
That's a great question, Jim. I think one of the things that I would do, and when you're trying to overcome those fears, and I think just basically it's the same when you're looking at both of those sides, whether it be something for business or something about riding a horse, you're still going to do the due diligence, so to speak, about trying to find out what the risks are and what you can do to minimize those risks. And it's just like change. Anything that changes in our environment, lose a job. Okay, so I use that example because there's so many people that have lost their jobs. So the fear is, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, is you're going to lose your house, you're going to lose your car. Well, once you lose your job, what are the next steps? Well, you start looking in the newspaper, you start getting your resumes together, you start reaching out to your network of friends and start networking.
What you and I talked about earlier was that whole you're replacing every one of those negative images, those negative thought processes, with the positive. The negative image is, I may not be able to pay my house bill. I may fall off the horse. I may fall off of this chasm and into the abyss. The positives in each one of those is completely different. But one, I'm going to make it to this beautiful meadow where all of these beautiful trees are.
Right.
I'm going to have a new job, and I'm going to have more challenges and more wonderful experiences with new and exciting coworkers. The other one on the horse, I'm going to be able to achieve, jumping and running and racing with this animal, and we're going to be able to move faster than I've ever been able to move on my own 2 feet. So you're replacing the negative image with the positive image, and you're letting that positive image be the driver going forward.
Exactly, and I think you paint a picture of that. And one of the things that I would even suggest that listeners do is to create some type of a vision board. We'd mentioned that on the show previously about having something that's a little more positive for you to look at on your mirror as you're getting ready in the morning. And let's say you want to find that perfect job, or you start putting some pictures of the job that you want to create in your mind. Because of the law of attraction, the more positive things and more positive influences that you get around you or put into your head, that's what's really going to motivate that individual or help to keep them in a positive state. So it reduces the fear if you start thinking that process. Because our minds really can just run away easily.
Sure.
And, mine does that. And I'm not immune to it. But it's as I mentioned about having that awareness, you can kind of you can stop it. You can just say, hey, look, is this really what's going to happen? No.
Before we take our next break,
sure,
we talked about fear. I want to talk about the other aspect that we've talked a little bit 2 shows ago, and we've kind of delved on an ongoing basis, and that's this procrastination deal. Fear and procrastination, in my mind, almost work side by side. Because if you're fearful of doing something, you're naturally going to procrastinate in doing it. If you're not sure about hopping on the motorcycle or riding the horse or whatever, your first reaction is going to be fear. Your second reaction is going to be procrastination. I'm just going to put this off longer and longer and longer. We've identified, and you found a great source for us, and this will be available on Renee's webpage, so I'd encourage you to email him, or you can email it to your request here at the station to info@KBEC. But he's identified 18 radical ways to stop procrastination. Think we can get 2 or 3 of those in before the break?
Oh, absolutely.
Let's do it real quick.
Yeah, I think we can get to it before break.
Okay.
Number 1 is just do it already. One of the things is...
and we're not stealing Nike's positioning line here, but it's very appropriate for this. If you want to get over procrastination, just do something.
Exactly. And actually, this is on a website that's a source that I found out there, so that I didn't create all this. But one of the things is just do it already. In other words, what the heck, just do it. And that, again, it goes back to why do we stop ourselves? So if you're procrastinating, just do it now. Do a fraction of it. Just do a portion of what you're trying to get done. I mean, that's an easy thing to do.
Also, define if it's even worth doing.
Define it if it's worth doing.
I think a lot of people look at it and they go, I'm procrastinating because I don't want to do this. Well, the reality may be you don't need to do it. Just get rid of it. It's not going to affect your life one way or the other. But if you do answer that question, yes, then do something.
Exactly. Number 3 is don't put stock into your moods. And that is a huge one, because if your mood swings, like if you're feeling down, that can really bring you down to where you're just not going to get anything done. So if you just say, hey, I don't feel like doing it, or it's going to take a long time to get it done, it's so laborious, then you're pretty much talking yourself out of even starting that project from the beginning.
How do you overcome the mood and the time aspect? If you're not in the right mood to do something, we're not talking about, hey, it's not bad to start it tomorrow. What we're talking about is putting something off indefinitely. You may not be in the right mood to identify something today, but identify what mood you're going to have to be in to overcome that sense of procrastination.
Sure, and for me, if I'm not in the right mood when I'm working on a project, I'll step away from it. I'll come back to it, or I'll say, hey, I'm going to take a break for an hour, and then come back to that project, and then start back over again and have a different kind of change of thought process.
Good deal. Hey, we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about the 18 radical ways to overcome procrastination. We just gave you 3 of them. We always are welcome to take your calls here at KBEC at 972-923-1390 or 972-938-1390. We have the Success Guys in studio today. I'm fortunate enough to be in studio with Renee Guerra. We'll be back in a quick minute. We're back in studio today with, Life and Money Matter guys. Renee Guerra and Jim Phillips here on a beautiful Saturday afternoon in Waxahachie, Texas, talking about the 18 radical ways to overcome procrastination. And we had just given our listeners the whole aspect of mood. And after mood, there's a couple other ones. Renee, why don't you share those?
Yeah, I'd like to. This one is called commit to it loud and clear. In other words, if you're going to do a project and you tell yourself, I'm going to commit already, I'm going to commit it loud, I'm going to commit it and mean it, and you commit it to yourself. The big key, Jim, is that when you're committing to do something, the commitment's to yourself. So it's like a contract, I feel that way. So once you start making a plan to do it, it's really the commitment to yourself. So that can eliminate the procrastination, help you eliminate it.
In other words, the hardest thing to do is shortchange yourself.
Exactly.
You don't want to do that.
Yeah. And so I think that's really important. And the other thing on top of that is share your commitment. Choose one person or somebody you can tell that, hey, this is what I'm going to accomplish. And if you have an accountability partner, that's someone that you can talk to on a daily basis about the goals that you want to complete on a daily basis or projects you want to get completed. I think that's an important. Once you start sharing that with someone and say, hey, I want to get this done by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, hopefully that person will call you and say, did you get that finished? So you make a commitment. Stop playing the victim card, which I really like this one.
I do too.
I love this one.
And so many of us do it. So many of us sit there and go, oh, it's John's fault, it's Steve's fault, it's Susie's fault, it's the weather's fault, it's an act of God's fault, it's everybody else's fault but mine.
Exactly, and I really like this term in this one here. It says, be your own hero instead.
Exactly.
And I love that part because, you have to be strong and stand tall and to be proud of yourself and then stop the victim mindset. And then when you do, you can also be aware when it creeps in. And, the next thing would be kill the excuses. So, you have to really kind of tell yourself, again, I'm going to talk about the excuses. There's a book called Excuses Be Gone by Wayne Dyer. But, we get ourselves all the excuses of why we don't get anything started, why we can't get anything done. So, again, kill the excuses. Number 8 is use the small chunks of time. We talked a little bit about that already, about chunking it down. You can take your project and make it a little bit smaller if it's a really big, broad project that's going to take several hours, and then chunk it down. And so you can make it into manageable parts, just like we talked about when you eat an elephant, you can eat it one bite at a time. Is that what they say?
Exactly. I like that procrastination subject of dealing with time, because I think time can either become a penalty or it can become a positive. And when I say that, the penalty is procrastination turns time into a negative. If you're really trying to use time to your benefit, you're going to realize that, okay, I've got 6 weeks to do a project. Or we talked in the past on some of Mike's deals when we're talking about financial planning and paying taxes and doing those kind of things. You've got a full year from right now before your next tax bill is due. Well, if you wait until February of next year to do anything, you've just wasted 10 months. But if you take each week and say, okay, I'm going to do one part of this project, if you take each day and say, I'm going to do one step of this project, you're going to then use time as a positive for you, and you're going to see time as a way to get things done in a positive way versus the negative way of just burning off time and then all of a sudden not having enough of it to get the job done.
I like that, Jim, because I think on this one here, number 8, where it says, the chunk of time, it says if you really cannot dedicate an hour to something that matters to you, then there needs to be a fundamental shift in your lifestyle design. And I think it really hits the nail on the head, because you really have to start making that time and how important it is for you.
Right. And you can find 100,000 things to do to fill your time, whether it's staring at a computer screen and playing a game or taking a walk or whatever. But you got to ask yourself, what is the most important thing I need to be doing right now in my life to move forward?
Mm-hmm. I like that. And I think that kind of dovetails into decide on your mantra. I think this was a really cool one because you want to have the positive affirmations, and then we talked about having things posted on your mirror in your bathroom. And one of the mantras they have, if they can, so can I, or it's now or never. I really like the part about now or never, and that can keep you from procrastinating and start saying that mantra over and over again when you start feeling yourself getting stuck on a project.
I'm a big believer that one of the best things you can do in that regard is just write that down over and over.
Yeah.
You know, go into a daytime or go onto a piece of paper and just write that down. It's now or never. And then give yourself the headline. I'm a big believer that, you know, you sit down and you say, this is the number one thing I've got to do today, and you write it in big, bold, 3-line letters. You don't worry about the lines on the paper or whatever. You say, this is what I'm going to get done.
Yeah.
And it helps reinforce that mantra. You see it, you feel it, you breathe it, and you are it.
And I think that mantra, number 10, is turn a deaf ear to your inner voice. And to stop that inner voice is to use that mantra.
Sure.
You repeat it over and over again, and that helps you to quit listening to the voices that are going on inside your head by telling you these, the negative things that could be going on. Number 11 is do not accept the fear. And we talked about fear already, so you just reject it,
Exactly. You walk away from it and say, no more, I'm not thinking about that.
I like this piece because it says engage in a conversation to calm your nerves. And that's another way of looking at it, to be in charge and to have control. So it goes, what you want to do is to empower yourself. Number 12 is to gain some perspective. And what do you want? What's holding you back? And what's the procrastination that's doing that? What's keeping you from doing it? Have a little faith, and what's the worst thing that can happen? 13 is to create enough pain, as in, what's the pain of not getting it done? Sometimes pain is what makes us move forward. And some people, and that goes to like jobs. If there's enough pain, people will get out of a job that they can't stand anymore. Number 14 is ask yourself with brutal honesty, who hasn't had a conversation with oneself? So why not make it a good one? So in the privacy of your thoughts, ask yourself, why are you procrastinating? What is it? Fear, laziness, or is it lack of knowledge? We've talked about exploring things about horseback riding, getting in videos and doing some investigation and some work. So what's the soft core and listening to the whispers coming back? Cultivate self-discipline. That's number 15.
That is so critical. Cultivating self-discipline to overcome it. That is literally taking control. And we've talked about this on show number 1. The only way you can make a difference in your life is to accept that you are the person that's going to make the difference.
It's true. It's taking 100% responsibility and finding out that you're the one that has that change. And number 16 is make that deadline count. Setting goals and deadlines are for for the birds, but nothing can be easier than putting a date on the calendar. And how do you make that count? So you have to have repercussions in place. So when you have a project that's due in 30 days, or 10, let's say just put on a 2-week period, and you wait until the last night to get it done, you got to really make that deadline count. You may want to put a deadline of a week ahead before the 2 weeks.
You know what I find fascinating in the game of radio? Radio people understand deadlines. You know why?
Yeah.
Because radio is time. And if we're not on time, we're not broadcasting. And if we're not broadcasting and we're not prepared, we can't make up for that last 30 seconds. Now, we can prepare for the next 30 seconds that are coming forward. But if we're not ready and we're not prepared and we're not on time, that time's gone. Our listeners aren't sitting around going, well, what are they going to say next?
Oh, that's true, because you guys are, it's really a time.
We are
so
time.
True.
We are time. There's no question about it.
Number 17 would be share your progress. What are the things that, when you have a breakthrough through your procrastination, celebrate it by sharing with others, some of your friends, that, hey, this is some project that I've been working on. Be honest, I've been working on it for several months, so I'm just now completing it. I've had some friends of mine that posted on Facebook about some things that they're trying to get done, and they celebrated. They put it on Facebook and said, hey, I finally completed this project, even though I've been putting it off. And so much support comes to them. And then number 18 is so important, is reward yourself big, huge even. So, celebrate in that, bask in the glory of being able to finish that project, and then feel the feeling of how that feels, the sensation of it, because what you can do is you can cultivate that feeling of and bring that up. In other words, we talked about how the mind can just tear you down. Well, if you can go back to that project that you finished and completed and you got so excited about it, just by thinking about it can excite that individual. So that's another way of getting yourself pumped up, getting yourself motivated to get out there and make the
and the body wants to re-experience that.
It will.
I mean, once the body achieves that adrenaline rush of being able to run the marathon or finish the tax form or finish the book that you're writing or whatever, that adrenaline, once it gets into your system, the body will come back very quickly to you and say, hey, I want to do that sensation again. I like that feeling.
It does. It releases the endorphins, so your body has that high, and I like that too, because I've been able to think about some accomplishments that I've made and done in my career, and I'm like, wow, that's just a cool feeling. And so when I start getting that point of procrastination, it's okay, I want to get back to that feeling when I finish that one particular project. Those were the 18 radical ways to overcome procrastination. Renee, why don't you share with our listeners where they can find that on the webpage and where you were able to find it. I think it was prolificliving.com. Prolificliving.com is where I ended up getting this information from, but if they want to email me at our info@kbec.com, that'll come to my email address. I would encourage the listeners to at least look at this. Don't procrastinate and not get this information, because it's really great information to help you move forward. And that's what our show's about, is try to get people to, one, change their life, and then also look, with Mike not here, we're looking at financial goals and financial planning. So, our goal is to help the individuals out that are listening, and so this would be a great tool, so they don't have to go to the website now. All they have to do is just email info@kbec.com, and that automatically comes to me, and I'll just send them this information.
And it is always free.
Yes.
We're not here to try and sell you anything. We're not here to try and get you to, slip us another $500 or anything. We're here to try and provide these tools that are out there in the community or in the resource library to you at no charge, so that you can review them, download them, put them into your own life, look at them, and hopefully it'll make a difference. To that end, I want to say thank you, Renee, for carrying the torch today. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Info@kbec.com, as you're out there and about. Listeners, is always the place that you can send your questions to the Success Guys, Renee Guerra and Mike Hill. They've been kind enough to step up here and show us some expertise in the areas of finance, the areas of life coaching, and what it means to make your life a better place. So to that end, I say thank you very much. We will be back next week, 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Hopefully the good Lord will allow us back in here. And to that end, thank you for listening, and we do appreciate it.
You've been listening to Life and Money Matters with the Success Guys on 1390 KBEC. Mike Hill is a registered representative of and securities offered through Berthel Fisher and Company Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Hill & Associates Wealth Management Advisors is independent of BFCFS. The interpretations and organizations of these ideas are the confidential thoughts of Mike Hill and do not represent the opinions of Berthel Fisher and Company Financial Services.
Remote Reward. Sign up to win $100 from any one of our remote broadcasts. From Classic Texas, 1390. KBEC.